Mardo, we really appreciate it. My name is LaShonda White, and I work in the city manager's office. And so on behalf of the city council, city manager, we welcome you to, this is our third community workshop regarding the city's move from at-large elections for city council to district-based elections for city council. So we thank you for taking time out of your evening tonight. Thank you again to the Fairmede Hilltop Neighborhood Council and ARDO for helping connect us with Pastor Lauren and Hilltop Community Church. Thank you for everyone for coming out tonight, and thank you to Pastor Lauren. He's been really great and has opened up the doors for the church to us. I just want to share a few things. We have, hopefully everyone has an agenda. It has a tentative timeline so you can see the different meetings that we've had, and you can understand our 90-day window and the work we've done from November that will go forth until January. We also have a packet that includes all of the maps that were in, Shalise will talk about them in more detail in her presentation, but this is the maps that were completed and were submitted to City Council for review. And on the back of each map is some demographic information. And we also took the liberty of blowing those maps up with the demographic information so you can take a look after the meeting. We have post-it notes so that if you have comments that you want to leave, because that really we want feedback, you can leave post-it notes about why you like map 113 and what do you like about it. And then we also have these comment cards, the green ones. There's some at your table. We'll have opportunity for discussion. We'll be taking some notes. We're also audio recording this. And but if you have comments that you want to provide, you didn't get a chance to share them in this meeting, or you're uncomfortable doing that in public, please share that and leave those with us on your way out. With that, we want to thank you. There is food, so take food as you need it. The restrooms are out this door through the hallway. And once again, we thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to Shalise from National Demographic Corporation.
Thank you. I'm going to try to use the stand. We have a unique setup, so I'm going to be shuffling a lot of things. Welcome. My name is Shalise Tilton. I'm Senior Consultant with National Demographics Corporation. We have been assisting cities, school districts, other agencies for over 40 years in their districting and redistricting efforts. Since the California Voting Rights Act has gone into effect, roughly 40% of all cities over 10,000 have now converted to being by district. So it will be the standard in California in the next few short years. So I do want to just commend the City of Richmond for the tremendous coordination in putting together not just 2 but 4 community forums and their website in short order, as well as all of the outreach materials. Just to give you a concept, we used to do all this that they've done. We used to take a year to do districting projects. And now we have to do it in a very compressed timeline, and I'll explain quickly about that. How many of you have gone to any of the other presentations? Okay, and how many of you have watched it on TV or are just pretty new to the process? Who's new to the process? Okay, so tonight I'm going to quickly go through a little bit about the California Voting Rights Act, and then we'll get into the maps. So the California Voting Rights Act is actually a very short law. It's roughly 7 paragraphs. If one wanted to read it, you could look it up. It's in Elections Code 14025. And it was it was based on federal law. So what was happening in California, because we have a pretty diverse communities, and we definitely have diverse communities in the City of Richmond, it was difficult for someone to challenge an at-large election system in the state of California. because we don't have, our communities are just not as segregated as in other parts of the country. And so the legislators recognized that the at-large systems may dilute the voting strength of protected class groups, and they were unable to, plaintiffs were unable to bring forward lawsuits based on federal law because there were basically 4 standards that had to be met before you could file a lawsuit. So the legislators came up with the California Voting Rights Act that lowered the bar and made it easier for a plaintiff to file a lawsuit. What was happening in the state of California, because it was very easy to file a lawsuit, we saw a lot of cities and school districts and water districts being sued without the opportunity to voluntarily switch. So they were just hit with a lawsuit, and they had no choice but to either go to trial on the lawsuit or to settle it. So most of the agencies settled, but the settlement dollars were in the millions of dollars. So small school districts were spending millions of dollars to settle very quickly a lawsuit and end up with districts. So what the legislature did is they said we need to protect tax dollars. We'll put a system in place where rather than being served with a lawsuit, now the process is if a plaintiff is interested in suing a city for their at-large system, they have to give them a demand letter. And that demand letter gives them an opportunity to voluntarily switch and take advantage of what most term is a safe harbor against these legal fees. And the legal fees are now capped at $30,000 if the city complies with a very tight timeline. So that is why this seems like a very rushed process. So once you get the letter, you have basically 45 days to say, yes, we intend to begin the process of transitioning. So just to clarify some terminology, an at-large election system is when the entire voters vote for the entire city council. There is another term called from district, and from district would be where all the voters vote for the entire city council, but the city council would have to be from a particular district. California Voting Rights Act says we consider that to be at large and vulnerable to a lawsuit. So the only safe place to go is from by districts, where the city will be divided into 6 districts, and only those voters who live in that district can vote on a candidate, and that candidate must reside in that district. So that's where we are headed. So the council met that first step in adopting a resolution of intention to transition, and now we're in the second phase of this safe harbor, which is a 90-day period to actually make the transition. Within that 90-day period, there has to be 4 public hearings that are held prior to the council adopting a map. So we've held the first 3, actually. The first 2 public hearings were held by the council to receive input from the public on how they want the public wants to see on the maps. Then Tuesday night was the first opportunity that the city council got to see the maps. At the onset, the city council made the decision to make all tools available to the public to be able to participate fully in the process. So there are various tools that were available. We provided a paper map that gave some population numbers so that to help guide you, because the overriding factor is you must have an equal population in each of the 6 districts. So that's a mandate. If we gave you blank maps, you would not have a clue. So what we did is we offered a tool that divided the area into population units. If you didn't like one of those population units the way we draw it, that's fine. There were instructions on the sheet that says draw the line where you want it, and then we'll adjust accordingly. One of the constraints that we have is that we must follow the census block geography. So when the census, federal census is conducted, they they count population by block. If the city were perfectly square, we have some square blocks in the city, that's typically what a block is. So we are able to follow the geography of the block. So if you did not care for how we drew the population units, then just wrote right where you want the line is, and then, but we must follow the census block geography. So to help in guiding the maps, we we made available another tool called the Interactive Map Viewer. And that Interactive Map Viewer, it looks very much like a Google map. You're able to zoom in very closely and you'll able to see the census block geography and the lines. So if you zoom in closely on the Interactive Map Viewer, then you're able to see the population count. The Interactive Map Viewer is helpful because sometimes you have very odd-shaped census blocks. Some very odd-shaped census blocks. So if you see the maps and you're wondering why they're drawn that way, sometimes it's because of the geography of the census block. But and if there's interest in looking at Interactive Map Viewer after through the presentation, then we can show you that Interactive Map Viewer. Also on the Interactive Map Viewer, all the maps that have been published are on the Interactive Map Viewer. So you can zoom into street names. You can change the base layer of the map to be a satellite image if you wanted to see where certain buildings are. You can even type in your own address. We have overlays on that Interactive Map Viewer. One of the overlays is the neighborhood associations. So you can activate a map and then you can overlay the neighborhood associations and see how well that particular map follows the neighborhood associations, if that's something that is a guiding priority for you. One thing to know that all maps that submitted, we don't vet or weed out any of the maps in advance. All maps that are submitted are produced by the NDC along with a demographic summary of each of the maps. The maps that we're showing you today are 8 maps. Those are the 8 maps that are legally compliant. So we ask and we encourage people to submit a single district map, which is very useful because it gives us an idea of what you know your neighborhood to be, and the single districts help us in drawing future maps. We can't adopt just a map that only has one district. We have to have 6 districts. So, and then the law requires that the districts be contiguous. So they have to share one common boundary. Maps that meet at a point are not considered contiguous, and that was just recently clarified in the law. So contiguous is the #1 priority. Any questions on the timeline? So the timeline, the other difficult thing about this law and having to get it done in 90 days is that we have to post maps 7 days in advance. We also have to have some time to be able to produce those maps. So if there are any changes to the maps that are here tonight, we would need to have those changes in actually by tomorrow in order for us to produce them, get them published on the website for the city to consider. Now, if you're unable to get a map in and you do have just slight changes to a map that's been published, you can, and we encourage you at the council meeting, you can come in and say, I like most of the features of a particular map. However, I would suggest that there be an adjustment made where you move this over and move that over. Sometimes that is effective. The idea would be for you to take one of the maps and draw what you want the changes made. If you know that there's a map that you like and it very closely fits what you like, and make the changes. If you're worried that you're going to move too much population, again, use that interactive map viewer to kind of look and see what the population numbers are if you're requesting those changes. There's a question. Shall we move through all of this and then we can answer questions at the end? So I mentioned that there are laws that we must follow when we're drawing the maps, and the federal laws require equal population, and we must use the federal census data. So the last time the census was done was in 2010. So that's the population numbers that we're using. When we're talking population, it's all people. So whether citizens or non-citizens, it's everyone who's counted. Babies, every human being is counted. And that's how we divide population. Also, we must follow the Federal Voting Rights Act so that the districts must be drawn in a way that does not dilute the effectiveness of a protected class group. So sometimes you may have heard the term cracking or packing. So you can't draw a district that would intentionally divide a neighborhood that has a high concentration of protected class group, or you can't put all the protected class group into a single neighborhood so they have no effectiveness in any other neighborhood. And there can be no racial gerrymandering. So if you have very strange borders that don't make sense, you know, jagged edge, just borders that don't make sense, and if the only reason why those borders are drawn is because to pick up a percentage of race, then that's a trigger for racial gerrymandering that we need to avoid and would recommend. Not adopting a map that did such, unless there is a clear and compelling reason why the borders were drawn that way. So there's a law that goes into effect on January 1st, and the City of Richmond will be one of the first cities that has to abide by the law. And what part of that law does is actually set an order of priority for the criteria to be used when you're drawing the maps. So the first one is that the maps be contiguous. So the maps that have been non-contiguous, we've identified, and actually we don't have any of those printed out. If it were the case of just one little two minor adjustments, then we would work with the map submitter and fix them, but there were too many, it would have required way too much population balancing to fix those that were non-contiguous. The second level of priority is to respect neighborhoods and communities of interest. So those neighborhoods that share the same socio and economic interests should be placed in the same neighborhood, in the same district when possible. So each of these criteria is prefaced with to the extent practicable. It's always not possible to meet all of the criteria, and the state recognizes that. When practical, to use clear and visible, clear and natural boundaries that make sense to the voters. Compactness, when possible. When you're tracking compactness, it actually is defined in the new law that you would not bypass one neighborhood to pick up another neighborhood. Once those those are the higher priority criteria. There are other criteria that we can use in drawing the maps after those top criteria are met, and that is respecting voters' wishes. If it's possible to draw boundaries that don't pair council members, and we try to present such an option. Oftentimes it's not. I believe all these maps pair council members. And also to take into consideration multiple representation of non-populated areas. So those who were at the last council meeting, there was the council expressed some desire to have multiple representation along the shoreline, which is not populated. And it doesn't mean you have more than one council member in a single district. It means that each district would be drawn to include a particular non-populated area. That's where we more talking about multiple representation. We do provide some concentration maps that assist those who want to draw maps in identifying where the high concentration areas are or protected class groups. We're talking for the Latino and the Asian American protected class groups. Those are minority language protected class groups. So there have been a time in our history where we didn't always have election materials available in minority languages, so they're considered a protected class group. So for our Latino, and when we're looking at these concentrations, instead of looking at total population, now we're going to look at eligible voters. Oftentimes it's referred to as citizen voting age population. Sometimes it's abbreviated as CVAP. So when the courts are looking at the effectiveness of a particular district, they'll look at that category. They'll look at citizens who are 18 years of age, and to see how well your districts have been drawn to have an effective district for your protected class groups, so they're able to elect a candidate. For the Latino community, we see we have Latino voters who are particularly concentrated between São Paulo and 580. The lighter colors, the light greens, the yellows, the pinks, are showing you the higher concentrations in this particular mapping scheme. For our African American eligible voters, we see concentrations particularly in Hilltop, in the Iron Triangle, and between Ohio and I-580. For the Asian American community, oh, did I get it?
What color is that?
Yeah, there were on. Did you have a question?
You were trying to show, like, where is it? How do we see that on the map? Like you said, the Latino is the pink section, and then you said African American is what?
Yeah.
It's each ethnic group.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, there's a different page for each group. And I realize our Christmas decorations here are covering the title on the page. So this particular one that I'm showing you is the Asian American citizen voting age population.
And would you look at the purple?
You're looking at the greens, the lighter colors. So there are not very many greens, and actually the pink indicates that there's 75% or more populated. That area is 75% or more. We don't have a lot of areas for Asian Americans that are in that category. So yes, you're looking more of the greens, which are about 50%, 50 to 65%. These maps are available on the city's website, so you can see them more easily than I realize it's difficult on the screen up here. The map for the white eligible voters are particularly concentrated along the water south of I-580 and along the border of El Cerrito and in the hills of El Cerrante. There's your white. We received 10 maps that were received from residents. 4 were partial maps, as I mentioned, so they only identified either 1 or 2 districts. And those maps are available to look at on the city's website. There were 3 maps that had portions that were non-contiguous. If you've not drawn a map, it's very difficult to do. And oftentimes you're very focused and you get the few districts that you really know well, get them perfect how you want them, and then you're just trying to population balance the other ones. And so sometimes it results in especially when you're using an Excel tool, it sometimes results in non-contiguous boundaries. But by no means do we discard these maps. These are very helpful. And sometimes you can say, hey, this map, I know it's non-contiguous, but I really like this particular district within that map. Is there a way we can fit it into another map? We had one that was contiguous. It wasn't quite population balanced, and it could possibly be adjusted for that. National Demographics submitted 3 maps. So what we do is we look at the maps that have been submitted, we see what options were there, what options were not there, and then we submitted those maps. 2 of the maps were submitted by the Plaintiffs' Council. So we have a total of 8 maps to consider, and they're all on the tables there. I'm going to go through some of the features of each of these maps. These are snapshots of the maps we don't have printouts of, but again, they are on the website if you're interested in looking at these maps. These maps were non-contiguous, so they would not be able to be adopted by the council if they are presently drawn. My screen doesn't show the same thing that's there, that's why I'm having to look, make sure. And then these are the partial maps that were submitted, and these give us a really good indication of what the neighborhoods that the submitter believed should be kept together and made sense to the submitter. And actually we're able to use some of this information to help us in drawing maps. We are using a lot of 110 and coming up with a revision based on comments from the last meeting. These are partial maps. What we do when we present the maps is we look at the maps and try to group them in categories that have similar characteristics. So this particular category has similar hilltop area for maps 101 and maps 114. Uses I-80 as the border for the hilltop area. Both have single districts also in the waterfront area. So you can see the area below 580 is all in one single district. Map 101 extends north of 580 to pick up population balance in its District 4, and maps 114 picks up the annex area, so it goes a little bit. Might just be switched on this. Yeah, map 114 goes up higher. Map 101 takes up the annex areas. Sorry, this is confusing having to do. I think I skipped a slide. Let's see here. Map 103 was actually one that the council, a couple of the council members mentioned as liking at the last meeting. It's slightly out of population balance, so that we could make some adjustments there. We do have some concerns, some Federal Voting Rights Act concerns about the effectiveness of the district with the highest concentration of Latino eligible voters. It's District 1. Its percentage is 38%. The thing that makes it difficult is the next closest protected class in that district is a close 33%. So there's only a 5% advantage for that Latino district. So if the council want to go with 103, we would be recommending there would be some changes to that to make it a more effective Latino district. And in fact, we have been coming up with some possible solutions.
I thought you said that you couldn't really base a district based on racial priorities. I mean, that was one of so I would think that we would want to call it a Latino district if that's really what it ties together, it seems.
You are correct. That cannot be the sole criteria. It can be one factor, but it cannot be the only factor. On the other hand, when we're seeing percentages that are very different from others that are submitted, that's giving us an indication that perhaps the neighborhood was drawn in a way that didn't keep that concentration together. So in this case, we're seeing that it has a pretty good blend of two protected classes that are deleting each other to somewhat. But if you have a higher and a greater advantage, then we need to be mindful of drawing districts that give a protected class group effectiveness.
I was curious, how do you factor in gentrification?
Yeah, that's a difficult. That's difficult to address, and perhaps we could finish and then get to more of the questions and a deeper discussion. But yeah, it's the idea of or the goal of the California Voting Rights Act is a safeguard to prevent against voter dilution of your protected class groups. So So we know that naturally happens with gentrification, but we need to look at the numbers as they existed in Richmond. And actually, the numbers that we're looking at for your protected class groups are more current than 2010, but they still are not the most current. We have to use the American Community Survey, so it lags behind. We don't have the most up-to-date information. Shall we continue through and then do questions so that we can, would that be useful? I know we passed up a question earlier as well.
So do you want to stop and answer some questions, or do you want to wait till the end?
Well, we're getting very close to be finished with this part, and then I think it would be good to ask questions at the end. And that way we'll be able to go back and we can visit some of these maps more closely and it'll be more helpful. So with map 103, because it was favored by the council and it has those concerns, at NDC we're working on revision to map 103 that would alleviate some of those concerns and also perhaps address another concern that was raised at that meeting about the San Pablo corridor. And we were able to come up with one that would not pair it with the hillside community, but also keep it whole. Similar to what was so we're just putting the final, I was hoping I'd be able to roll that out today, but we're putting the final touches on it. It will be posted and will be for council to consider at the next meeting. The one thing that the council liked about map 103 is that it had multiple representation in the waterfront area. So it liked that there were different districts that extended to the waterfront area. There's also a concern raised at the council meeting about the waterfront area dominating perhaps some of the, potentially have all the candidates be from the waterfront area as it developed. So we're looking at those population numbers and being mindful of how those districts are drawn so that we not dilute the effectiveness of your protected class groups. So those districts that have the highest protected class groups, we would, the goal would be to draw it so that they would include the waterfront, but some of the area would not be populated as much as the other areas. Map 115 has two districts along the waterfront. Still right now. And map 15 was drawn to align with the borders of the neighborhoods associations as much as possible. Diagonal Triangle, District 1 is in both District 1 and District 3. District 4 includes El Sobrante and some of Hillside. That division of Hillside on 115, Hilltop, I'm sorry. It's written in my notes as Hillside, and I knew that wasn't right. Thank you. The division in the Hilltop area does follow the neighborhood association line, but it is not kept in one single district for that. Now, that area in District 4 that you're seeing of the El Sobrante doesn't have enough population to be on its own, so it has to pick up somewhere. So there's only two options for it to pick up, either in Hilltop or down towards the San Pablo corridor. Map 113. Map 113, the main focus of drawing this map is we've heard time and time again in the community that neighborhood associations are important to the community and in many cases did accurately reflect the character of the socioeconomic and met all the check marks for, which doesn't always happen, but there's very strong neighborhood associations, as you all know, in Richmond. So we drew this map to very closely follow the neighborhood associations. It's not perfect. We had to split one area. It was the north and east neighborhood. District 1 picks up an area east of I-80, the Hilltop Green neighborhood. And District 3 includes the marina and shoreline. Since it follows the neighborhood association boundaries, sometimes the districts cross over the freeway, so it might look unusual, but that's why, is because we actually follow the geography of the neighborhood associations. And And typically where it crosses over the freeway, it's not a populated area. It just looks a little funny. That bump into District 5, that's a neighborhood association boundary, so that's the reason for that. So for, in this particular map, the district with the highest citizen voting age population for our Latino eligible voters is 45%, and that's 26% higher than the next protected class in this group. So it has a 26% advantage than, and is an effective Latino voting district. Map 104 is a highly compact map that was submitted by a resident. District 4 does cross over the freeway, likely population balance. The border between Districts 4 and 5 are very clean. District 6 follows the railroad. Has compact districts in the heart of the city. District 2 crosses over and picks up the annex areas adjacent to El Cerrito. Map 107, this one we're calling our railroad track focus, and often it's good to use railroad tracks because there are a few street crossings, so it ends up being a pretty natural border to follow railroads. There's a concern with District 5 is the highest Latino citizen voting age population at 39%, and within that same district, the next highest class is 23%. So there's only a 16% advantage for the Latino voters, so that could be a concern. It would be possible to switch out possibly some maps 104, District 4 and 5 to better keep that neighborhood together and create a more effective district. Map 102, it's district. There were some areas of the map that raised some concerns because we're not sure the reason for the configuration, and we want to make sure that it wasn't just solely racially based. So if there are reasons why some of the borders show a little bit of a jigsaw kind of configuration, for example, in the Hilltop area, there's a little area that extends out, that crosses over the freeway. And also, additionally, so we want to know the reason for that, as well as there are some jagged edges, particularly along District 1, where it would go and pick up a block and then skip a block and pick up a block and then skip a block and pick up a block. So we want to know the compelling reason for that and make sure that it's not predominantly, or that it's not racially based for those jagged edges. It does achieve a 52%. It's the highest Latino voting district, with the second highest at 18% for a 34% advantage. If there's an explanation for the concerns and bumps, then that would create an effective Latino voting district. So for tonight, what we're hoping to hear, are the maps that you prefer. It would be very helpful if you did make those comments and identify maps that you like, and if you can write them on, write your notes on the sticky notes, write the map number on it. If you like a map, but you like it because you particularly like one particular district, make sure you identify that and give us some reasons why. So we know it's important that it be kept together. That's very useful. The more detail you can get, or if you really don't like a map, or feel like the way two districts look in this map and two districts look in another map, let us know. Sometimes there's an opportunity to combine those. So that completes my presentation, and I can answer questions. We're recording it, so if we could have you speak into the mic, and that way those who are listening will be able to follow along.
Yes, so we will be taking questions. Please hold your question until the microphone comes to you. So we'll then maybe over here, and then I know you had your hand
talked about this being, the numbers being by the census 10 years ago. And then the question about gentrification came up. So can you explain, is it census? Is it gentrification? Is it a combination? The other question, I've heard maybe the Latino population mentioned a dozen or more times. And you've met, that's probably the only population. I did hear you mention the European population once. Is there a protected class according to your office, and who is that protected class? And the third question is, I don't think I've heard once an African American population, but I saw a map that you mentioned, you have the word Asian American. Where does the African American population fit into what's happening with this districting? And do you have a map to show us like you showed with the other groups?
Yes, there was a map. I'm sorry, I can bring it up right now. This is a map of the African American concentration areas, and this is also available on the city's website. So we must use the census data and as it existed in 2010. And then for the citizen voting age population, we use more current information. We actually use the American Community Survey. So for gentrification, that would be reflected somewhat in that newer information. The information that we draw from, it covers a 5-year span from 2013 to 2017 to determine the citizen voting age population in the city. So, and then we also, for each of the maps, we include demographic information that includes the household income, language spoken at home, other information, language fluency, immigration, housing status, whether renters versus homeowners. So that type of information is available for each of the maps for each of the districts. And that particular information is the more current information according to the American Community Survey. So the American Community Survey is conducted by the federal census. It goes out to one in every 16 households, I believe. It's either 16 or 14. And it's a 5-year running estimate. So every year they add the new year on and drop off the other. And so those are the numbers. So they're a little bit more current when we're looking at the concentration of your eligible voters. I hope that answered your question.
Microphone.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. For each of the categories, we have Hispanic, White, Black, and Asian Pacific Islander. The reason why we're focusing so much on the Latino district is that is the basis for the threat letter that was given to the city was the Latino lack of representation. So that is why my presentation focused on that, but each of the, and I can provide that information for you for each of the districts and the effectiveness for each of those classifications.
Hello. My question is, I know that you're repetitive, but you mentioned between Highway 80 and San Pablo Avenue is heavily concentrated Latino. There are Latino in the neighborhood, I live in the neighborhood, but like the lady says, with the gentrification going on and all the different changes, when did you draw those numbers? Was it like, was it recent? Was it 1982? When were these numbers drawn up? Because if you're that far off and you're doing this to give opportunities, example Latino based, have you done any? You're trying to give opportunity to a specific group of people, but have you, when it comes to voting, have you seen how Richmond votes? Meaning, have you done any research on do people vote according to race lines? It's a tough subject, but have you considered that before you did the study?
preliminary racially polarized, we've not done full racially polarized analysis for the City of Richmond. We're responding to the lawsuit, so we haven't done an in-depth analysis that I'm aware of. And we're not, the city has not, does not necessarily agree that there's racially polarized voting. The plaintiff has purported there's racially polarized voting, and that's the reason for the lawsuit. The difficulty is even if no racially polarized voting exists, it's costly to prove that in court. So you would go through the entire trial and end up spending probably over $1 million to prove there's no racially polarized voting in the end. So that's the difficulty. As far as the gentrification, the numbers that we're using are that American Community Survey that is the most recent information we have that the courts recognize as being the information that we must use to determine the concentration areas of your protected class group. So we're somewhat bound to using that information, the American Community Survey. So if you looked at the demographic sheets, you can see that there's a line that says ACS population estimate, and virtually everything below that is the American Community Survey, which is more current information than the 2010. So it would identify some of that gentrification, but it is the most recent data added to that was 2017.
Hi, I appreciate all the work on the maps. I think what's not resonating for me on the maps is I can't figure out any real characteristic or character or landmark of each of the districts. Like, for example, if I could see like commercial corridors that were laid out within it, because how I had been thinking that we should lay this out so that we could create like local economies with some sort of core walkable commercial corridor being developed. For example, I could see like San Pablo Avenue, I could see Uptown and downtown McDonald Avenue, 23rd Street, which is another important, in fact, that's a Latino commercial corridor. Point Richmond is another important corridor. And then Hilltop, which is, these are all cores of where people gravitate to do shopping. And that creates community and creates walkability. So it would help me on these maps because right now all I'm seeing is just areas without any real, something that is its central core. That's the main word I can use on it. So if you could identify for me some of these main corridors, it would help to be able to understand how these districts are being divided up.
Yeah, and if the city has a shapefile that identifies those particular areas, we can download that as one of the layers on the interactive map viewer. So if maybe anyone from the staff knows that that's available, we'll be happy to download. And then what you can do is you bring up that interactive map viewer and you can activate that particular overlay. So right now we have the neighborhood associations on there. You can see the borders of that. If there's some type of planning document that would have those other areas.
So Rob is indicating that this is one of the main issues in the general plan. So I want to suggest that I'd like to see a map that reflects these commercial corridors, or that we use. Well, I know they're there, but so that we can create a map that is based on it.
That's how you do it along the interactive.
Okay. Well, that's what I'm going to. Well, that's why I'm going to propose to submit a plan that takes those characteristics into consideration.
Yeah, if there's a shapefile that says
So I'm going to turn to Ms. Nikki and then Chad here, and then I'm going to Don. Yeah, I see it after Don.
Right, so my question is, outside of looking at the protected classes, are there recommendations being made to where there's not social and economic segregation with these maps? Because usually the economy follows the race. So what I would hate to see is that these maps are designed not only protecting, also limiting the ability for economies to thrive in areas that historically in Richmond have not received the investments needed because they were undesirable. So I think this is a great opportunity to kind of shake it up a little bit. So where we know the Iron Triangle has gotten the least amount of attention, that they are kind of added to other communities that have gotten the attention so that we can lessen the economic segregation that has been happening in the cities. So I don't know if that's something that you help with the recommendation as you're reviewing these maps of what the potential issue could be based on what the recommendations are.
So the new law actually states that those communities that share similar socioeconomic concerns, to the extent practical, be contained in a single district. So I don't know if that's just opposite of what you were looking for. I think that the idea is then you would actually have a person elected who it was from that community and would have 1/7 of the vote on the council.
Hi, I have a couple of questions. Can you let us know what the margin of error is for the HPS data that you're referring to?
Yeah, the margin of error is great. So it can be minimum of 3%, 3 to 5%. It can be great percentages.
At the next community meeting or on the website, can you clearly note what it is?
Yeah, I don't.
I mean, I think it should be publicly available because it should be public.
Yeah, I will find that out for you. It's my understanding there's not a set number, but I will find that out for you. Margin of error for the ACS, but there is a great margin of error. It is estimates.
Right, as it pertains to race and ethnicity. And then my second question is, I really appreciate the explanations that you're providing pertaining to the protected classes. So can you walk us through in the maps that NBC drew, which maps then provide representation for each of the protected classes to the greatest extent? And I'm sorry if you said that earlier, but that would be helpful for me to clearly understand. And I'm a Richmond resident, that's why I'm asking this question.
So the maps that were drawn by NDC are maps 113, 114, and 115. I don't know if we want to bring up,
Be helpful if you can see the maps as we're going. I realize that you can't.
these are so tiny. We have the ability, but because of the constraints of how we're set up, we could zoom into each PDF. If you have your laptop, you can go to the city's website, click on each individual PDF. You can look at the maps here, and there's some printouts. So when we're looking at map 113, as I understand the question, you're wanting to know the percentages of the citizen voting age population for the protected class groups.
No, my question was, of the maps that you drew, right, so 13, 14, and 15, which maps provide the highest representation of the protected classes by district?
Okay.
So because that to me is like the core of what we're trying to, that's the puzzle that we're trying to solve for, at least as I hear you explaining it. So I think there's been, so for example, if there are multiple protected classes, which one meets the burden of the lawsuit and then also provides subsequent opportunities as well?
Okay, so for map 113, for the Latino citizen voting age population, District 4 has the highest concentration at 45%. The next highest class in District 4 is the non-Hispanic white at 19%. So there's a 26% advantage for the Latinos in District 4. That's your highest. For the African American community, District 6 is 50%, 25%. So there's a 25% advantage for the Black community, or for in District 6 for the Black eligible voters. For the Asian Pacific Islander eligible voters, District 2 has 26% is the highest district that has the highest concentration. That district has 40% white, so it's not, doesn't have a percentage advantage. It's hard to do this. Actually, District 20, yeah, I would encourage you to look at the demographics. It's kind of hard to do this and evaluate all of them, because even though one single district may have a higher percentage, it may have a higher advantage even with a lower percentage. That's for map 113. For map 114, it's District 4 has 49% Latino citizen voting age population in District 4, with the next highest being the African American eligible voters at 18% in that particular district. So there's a there's a 31% advantage. For the African American eligible voters, there's a 51% majority in District 5. And for the Asian Pacific Islanders, its district with the highest concentration is District 1 at 28%. For map 115, District 1 has the highest Latino citizen voting age population at 47%, with the next class at 28% for a 19% advantage. For the Black community, the Black eligible voters, District 3 has 48%. And for the Asian Pacific Islanders, the highest district is District 4. And again, if you go to the website, each of the maps has this individual demographic information for each of the maps.
Good evening, thank you. I don't have any questions, but I do have 3 comments. 4 times tonight I've heard mention of the neighborhood councils, twice at the city council meeting, and 4 more times at the previous workshop on there. And I know I'm going to anger some of the really, really pro-neighborhood council people here, but I think it's a mistake to try to draw these lines based on neighborhood councils, mostly because the vast majority of the city either has a non-functioning neighborhood council or a barely functioning neighborhood council. And even on my own block, if I were to go knock on every door, I don't think they'd find anybody beside myself that even knew that we have neighborhood councils in the city of Richmond. So they're not as big of an issue as some of the neighborhood council people think that they are. Okay, the second issue, on your map 103 on the waterfront, trying to break it up into multiples. The problem with that is you take a look at the northern end. Do you really think that the people on the San Pablo border have anything in common with the people in the marina or in the south side or in the annex? Right. It just, I mean, you have a requirement that we're supposed to have similar interests. But this says, no, we don't have similar interests at all. I can't quite figure out, aside from breaking up the monopoly, the voting block monopoly, in the marina, the point, and the annex, I can't see any real reason to go that route. The last issue has to do with this, the gerrymandering that we keep talking about. If we read Attorney Rafferty's threat letter, he calls it a demand letter, I call it a threat letter because he uses the word threat on every page. I says, it's all about racial justice. That's the only reason we're doing this. But then, at one of the workshops, your man pointed out that we cannot consider just that. It cannot be a priority on there. But then many times here, we keep bringing up the fact that we have to draw it so that a protected class will have a better chance of getting elected. That sounds like you're drawing lines based on ethnicity again. It is. And if I ask people all the time, let's swap out any ethnicity with white. If we had said we want to make sure we've got districts where white people can get elected, that doesn't go over very well in most communities because it is biased, it is racist. But it is not biased and racist when we say that we're going to draw the lines to make sure that a Latino, or as Councilmember Martinez said at the council meeting the other night, if we draw it right, we get 3 Latinos on here. You don't think that he was looking just at ethnicity on there? I said, I went out there and pulled up a list of every city council member since 1992, what neighborhood they lived in, and what ethnicity they were. And 75% are minorities. 75%. Now, of course, we look at the council right now, and the mayor is the only one that is not a minority. And the mayor's race is not included in this. So.
Yeah, thank you. Did I understand you earlier to say that maps could be adjusted and resubmitted tomorrow? Is it just if somebody submitted a map and they want to adjust it? Or that members of the audience can say, oh, I like something or other, or I want to move something over, so I'm going to submit that as my contribution.
Yes, you can take someone else's map and adjust it and submit it as your contribution. If you're able to do a completely new map by tomorrow, you can do that as well.
By tomorrow.
Yeah, by tomorrow. And again, if you miss the deadline and not able to make those adjustments, you're still able to come to the council meeting. But then the council would only be able to speak to maps that are published. So you'd want to start with one of the published maps and say, with this map, I would like this map, but I would like it if you would make these particular adjustments.
Might as well make a follow-up point if I may.
Wait for the mic.
Okay. So, we live over on the other. I live over on the other side of 80, and our neighborhood council. Well, this of course is Carriage Hills and so forth, and it's a long ways from Carriage Hills. So a lot of us tend to go downtown, go to the city hall, go to the Armistice Brewery, whatever it might be. But, so we're just pointing out where we would like to see be part of the overall part of Richmond, as part of kind of compactness and so forth.
I just was curious about map 103. Who drew up map 103 in the... Okay, so that's the attorney. Oh, okay. And you said that this was the one that, did you mention the city council favors this one?
Just
There were a couple council members that liked this one. If the council were to go with this one, we'd recommend there be some adjustments because we feel that there could be a more effective Latino citizen voting population district. We want to prevent the city from a future lawsuit.
Yeah.
So actually, you just brought up a follow-up question for me, because I wasn't aware of the history of why we were going into this. Because earlier I thought it was a mandate from the state standpoint that all municipalities are going to have to go through this process. But it sounds as though because the city's being sued, we're going through this process. So I understand the sensitivity of addressing the demand letter or lawsuit. But I would also be sensitive that we don't create other issues with other protected classes and communities to where then they can say that there's been discrimination or an issue. I think this is an optimal opportunity to get it right the first time and to address the city's long-standing history of the segregation between communities and be able to use this as a tool to correct an ongoing problem. Because outside of the districts, we also want to hold the council members accountable to be able to serve their districts. And each and every one of them will have to have some asset and some leverage and some pull to bring in the resources that are going to be necessary to make their districts successful. So I guess that's one comment.
Would it be possible for everybody who's doing this, for you to have one map where you put every current city council and mayor on it? Because the one that's in Scott Rafferty's letter is inaccurate for one of the council members. That person has since moved. So for people who want to know what the council is looking at and their ability to get reelected, 103 separates out four of them are in separate districts. And so people need to be aware of the politics going on here, and they need to know where each council member currently lives. And Dennis Johnson has since moved since what was in Scott Rafferty's letter, number one. So the other one that you guys don't have up here, because I realized it was non-contiguous, was map 106. And part of the reason I liked map 106 was because it kept quite a bit of the shoreline together, but it did separate out the annex, and it addressed the San Pablo corridor. So it kept the San Pablo corridor together pretty much, and it kept the rest of the shoreline. So Marina Bay was with Point Richmond.
And that's good.
And I liked that map. I realize there's issues with it, but you guys don't have that. If I understood you correctly, you guys made 1, 13, 14, and 15, is that correct? Yeah. So,
but it's not too late. We got
yeah, so 115.
Microphones.
It's the kind of closest thing, but having Hilltop with Point Richmond just doesn't make sense. That's bad. Bad. So, but I do like the fact that the annex is unique from Marina Bay and Point Richmond. Point Richmond and Marina Bay, we share a lot. But I just think if there's a way that we can pull some of the key elements from 106 into a map, it would be nice. And it would keep the San Pablo corridor together.
And I think Hilltop should be part of.
Microphone.
Can I just recap? So the features you like are that the annex area is with the San Pablo corridor.
Yes.
Yes.
That the marina and shoreline is with
Marina Bay and Point Richmond shoreline, that whole area, even up to Chevron. Like if you look at map 115 behind you, apart from the Hilltop area, that's fine, the way you got that. But if we could bring Marina Bay into that and keep the annex going up a bit along the corridor like this, see, this is the San Pablo corridor that people want to keep together. And so I like how you kept, whoever did this, I realize it's non-contiguous, so it wasn't a choice.
Just only one non-contiguous spot there.
Right.
there's a couple. So
Yeah, so I do think it's important to keep the San Pablo corridor together, and I think it's very important for people to know where current council members live. So.
We're going to let Mary with George, and then Darlene, did you have a question? Okay, so then I'll come to you, sir.
I just want to know, after this process happens, does this mean that the lawsuit will not continue? And then what's to say that this process won't happen again if there's another protected class that feels that they're not represented? Or what will happen in that situation?
yeah, we can't guarantee that there would not be a lawsuit. We're trying to place the city in the best possible position to
So
avoid
would
a
we do
lawsuit.
this practice again if that were to come up?
Or it would be decided to settle in court.
2020 census.
I just want to say, the young lady said about keeping the San Pablo corridor, and with that would not only keep the numbers would be controlled to what your example, it keeps the corridor, which is a major thing that's going on. There's going to be, what I understand behind the scenes, there's regional things that are involved with the bus line and everything else, and keeping that Hilltop together with however it has to be possibly figured out, would work because they have all kinds of hilltop things going on, along with the Point Richmond and Marina. The reason why I'm piggybacking on that is because it is important. When you have neighborhoods like mine, the Richmond Heights, that have gone back since approximately 1930s, these have been, we've been meeting in churches. We're talking about neighborhood council, keeping this going. Most cities don't have something like this. You're occasionally going to get people that show up when they have a problem or when there's different issues, and that's when they'll come. The masses will come then. The core people, like the people here tonight, they're not going to get rid of neighborhood councils. That gives a voice to the people. You're going to stay strong. Now, if you're more politically motivated, then of course, that may not be your cup of tea. But for myself and others, we want to stay involved in this right now. This means a lot. My question to you, will you please, I said in 110, I know we have till midnight, but we don't want to be the type that has to sue because we can't get what we want. We want to be the type that works with you. Please consider the things in our neighborhoods, like the corridors, the neighborhood councils go back to the 30s. These are very important. Please don't disrupt our community. Bring us together.
Right, and if you have, can identify maps that you like, that have done a good job, they may not be perfect in other areas?
Our neighborhood submitted one to you. I'll set the record for Don.
Our neighborhoods, our neighborhood. What, Jim? Our neighborhood,
similar to 110.
We're very similar to 110. Our neighborhood council, we're talking about the neighborhood came together and did exactly what you wanted. The neighborhood came together Monday night, and for a whole neighborhood to do that, it's impressive. That neighborhood, by the way, is the neighborhood that's Richmond Heights.
Is that 110 out, laying out?
And so we really appreciate it.
Was that map 110?
It was one of the single.
Yeah. Oh, the one single ones, okay.
Yeah.
But the way that the lady had described it, that would be, I know it's not a question, but it's a statement. She had, the way that she had brought that along, from the corridor along there, basically, it's the paradigm. The greatest change is on the edge. That's where you start.
So you did 110? Jim? I think so.
Microphones, please. You're being recorded, and none of that being recorded.
Can you pull up 110?
It's all secret.
Okay, I won't talk. Pull up 110.
Patrick, are you able to go to the website and pull up the PDFs? 110 is the single district that was submitted, the single proposal mostly dealt with the San Pablo corridor area, all the way down to the annex area.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we have constraints with, oh, yeah, you can do it from here. So
Yeah, you can.
110 and just deactivate, that's 110, deactivate 101, activate right now. So this is the map that was the group effort. Yes.
No, that was actually submitted by some other individuals.
Okay.
There's more than one. We basically, I'm sorry.
Someone has a mic.
Okay, Don.
So, since this is really politically driven, and maybe you can go back to the slide that had the schedule of events, that might also help either it's going to get people upset or calm the nerves. Because there's a city council election that rolls around in 2020, and you have 3 districts up. Then in 2021, you have another set that comes up. Prior to that, we have more than 3 council members. So how's that supposed to actually work? What's the schedule for rolling out the districts for the election purposes? in 2020, and then again in 2021. There's just some overlap in there that doesn't necessarily make sense.
So there are a couple of factors as far as the rolling out of the districts. So you're exactly right. In 2020, there are 3 seats up, and those 3 will be elected based on the plan that they'll be adopting in January. Then we'll have to readjust the boundaries based on the new census data that comes in before the 2022 election, and there will be 3 other seats that are up. So as part of this process, once we narrow it down to maybe 1 or 2 or 3 maps, we'll start looking at assigning election years to each of the district numbers. And if a council member is assigned to a district, lives in a district, and has the same election year as that council member's term, then they're eligible to run if they so choose. If, for example, a council member is assigned to an election, it lives in a district that's assigned the 2022 election year, but yet their term is up in 2020, then they would have to sit out for 2 years before they can run in 2022.
I was worried about the 2020 census, realizing there would be a change there.
I still like to go back. I was trying to protect. You mentioned the Latinos, and the interesting thing is 23rd Street is a predominantly Latino commercial district. And part of the reason, though, that Jan was mentioning to me that it's hard to not divide it up is because half of 23rd Street is in Belding Woods, and the other half is in North and East Neighborhood Council, and really 23rd Street, which is a major, major commercial corridor, should really be part of that Latino district that we're talking about. It would probably give it, then make sure, put more emphasis on its improvements and work on it. So I'm back to commercial districts because I think that should be the connective tissue, or the truly how we're making it so it's not political. It's more about these commercial districts that have already emerged, that already create local economies in Richmond. So I wish I think you could help me out a little bit on figuring out where they would be so we could work together on trying to create one of these maps that takes that and makes that a major issue, major concern.
And one of the comment that you just made about the shopping center being more aligned with the Latino community and should be in that district, we often hear that, and we'll often adjust maps accordingly. So if you find a map that you like, and you like that district,
where 23rd Street is on these maps.
I would encourage you to look at the interactive map viewer, because you're able to zoom in, and you can put the satellite imagery so you can actually see the commercials, and if you commercial buildings, or you can activate open streets is one of the backgrounds you can activate, and it's some of those buildings are labeled.
Then I got to look at those populations. If I
You don't need to look at the populations. Yeah, if it's a commercial area, it's not populated typically.
Well, no, but you have to turn it into a district that incorporates a commercial district. We got to figure out what is the population around it.
Right.
District. I'll try to see if I can do it.
Yeah, look at that. Look at that interactive map you were talking to.
Thank you. My name is John. At this time, I grew up over in Norwood and San Pablo, went to Richmond High, spent a few years in the Marines, came back, lived in San Pablo a few more years, and now I'm living out on Framway and El Sobrante. But it is Richmond. It's a very cut up area. So somebody said they feel they did not get represented. And then this lawyer sued the city. Right? From this law. They passed a law that said, hey, you can sue your city, local city government, or county government if you think your vote did not count. And we're having a big argument about that right now, nationally. So if you draw up all these boundaries, and somebody is in a boundary, and they say, well, my vote didn't count. We could be at this again. I don't, is this like the Americans with Disability Act? My friend was trying to open up a restaurant over in El Sobrante, And within a week after he opened up, with all the right permits, got sued by the Americans with Disability Act because of a quarter-inch door. So who was a person in our city that said he was not represented?
Well, the plaintiff is not required to name, or the plaintiff's counsel is not required to name the plaintiff.
So we can have a secret sue guy that just says, okay, go sue a lawyer, don't mention my name.
Yeah.
I mean, this could go on and on.
Yeah.
And when I grew up around here, the worst thing I heard, my first about 4 years old, was about my neighbor, and they were Portuguese. This was a big Portuguese area back then. How are we going to keep it the same if we got this protected class? Can I only sell my house if I move out for 5 years, or go out in the country or to another state to avoid taxes? Who can I sell to? Are we going to do that? It just got to go right from this area to this area. I understand districts, and maybe it should be districts, and not have this at-large stuff. But when is it going to end? It won't. Somebody can say, hey, there's not enough of these people. We got a large Hindu community. We got a wonderful temple up on the hill, some great people in my neighborhood. I live on a little court, 15 houses. And the majority of the neighbors are all African American, 2 Hispanic, 4 Indian, and a Nepal. And we're the last white family left on that court. We've been there 26 years. So we've seen it change. It changes. You can't say, okay, now you have to live here. Are we going to draw red lines? You know, it's changing, and it's going to be changing. You can't say, okay, this area we're going to set up for these people. This area we're going to set up for these people. I just want to know the person's name that said I wasn't represented. I know, it's just not going to end.
I just wanted to do a quick time check. It is 8:34, so if you need to leave, if you have a question, please feel free to use one of the green sheets and turn it into David. I know there was other people that wanted to share their questions, so we can take which one and make sure we were respectful of your time. So again, agree there are green sheets in front of you so that you can fill out, and you can give them to David at the blue table up in the front. And we'll take a few more questions.
Hi, I just want to make sure we're on the same page with the 3 seats that are up in 2020. So what 3 seats do you have that are up?
Just see if I have that in my notes today. Yeah. We have someone who would know, because I believe I heard the pictures. Ben Troy, Melvin Willis, and
Eduardo.
J.L. Myrick. Those 3 are up in 2020.
And where do they live?
J.L. Myrick lives in the Iron Triangle on Santa Fe neighborhood. Eduardo's not up. Melvin lives in North and East on Barrett Avenue, roughly 35th and Barrett. And Ben Choi lives in Marina Bay.
Thank you. A couple of comments just for the public here. I've been involved with this kind of thing for about 3 years. I worked with the school district when Attorney Rafferty came and extorted money from them. First off, he doesn't have to have a client in order to send the threat letter. He didn't with the school district until they challenged him. Then he had to go shopping for a client. You know, but he has no obligation to let you know who it is until he files the lawsuit. Okay? But here's something for you, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but you know, because we have to use the data from the last census, 9-year-old data. Okay? Now, but we all know that people don't vote, registered voters vote. Okay, in the past 5 years, this is something I do all the time. I get data on this all the time. Just in the past 5 years, you've had a 15% increase in the registered voters in the city of Richmond. You've had 2% increase in African American voters, but you've had 26% increase in Latino voters. That's just in the past 5 years. You know that radically different the 4 years before that. But we have to ignore all of that because we have to use the data from the 2010 census. When we asked Attorney Rafferty if we could hold off and use the new, fresh data, get it done right, no, he absolutely refused. Yeah, he's not in it for racial equality. He's in it for the money. He took $318,000 out of the classrooms in the West Country Gosney Unified School District. And of course, his rationale there, I could have hit you up for $800,000.
Coming to you, and then, don't want to creep.
So the two maps that I can find on all of them that are on the website that are closest for the San Pablo border route are 106 and 110. And I don't know, I've tried to use a map tool on both a Mac and a PC, and it's horribly janky. It's really difficult to make these maps using that map tool. And I even went through this with the guy who was at the second workshop that I went to. And he was like, yeah, I don't know how to get it to work on a map on certain issues, and then we tried it on a PC and we had similar issues. So is it possible for you guys to make something and keep that San Pablo corridor together, like is similarly represented in 106 and 110, and keep the rest of the shoreline, like Marina Bay and Point Richmond, together? I don't know if you guys are willing to do something like that or not.
Because there were comments made at the last council meeting to that effect, we are working on a map that would do that.
And I just think, to her question, if you want to kind of, one way to look on these maps to know where 23rd Street is and Harbor Way, map 103 is delineated, the pink district is delineated by Harbor Way and 23rd Street. But I would request that don't split. That does not make sense. Marina Bay should be kept.
Which is crazy. Everybody wants to have it.
But splitting, 103 splits up Marina Bank. It's just, I get that they were trying to do a transportation corridor, but splitting up Marina Bay, no.
Hi, my question is going back to the data, because we've been using these different terms. So we're using the 2010 census. However, you're also using the American Community Survey from 2017. So how are the disparities addressed? Because I can only assume that there's going to be a difference in data from 2017 to 2010 based on this protected class. So how are you migrating those numbers to get to the real number if you're using two sets of data?
So we only use the total population federal census for balancing the districts. So that's for getting the appropriate number in the districts. And then we're using and that's based on 2010. Then within those districts, we're looking at the American Community Survey information that gives us more detailed information on the citizen voting age population by ethnicity. So, and that is, it's actually a range of from 2013 to 2017. It is an estimate. So they're two different, we're looking at two different sets.
So with the census is truly numbers, not looking at the ethnicity, age, nothing, just the total number of people.
Correct, for the federal census. Total population.
So my name, I'm Regional Program Manager for the California Count 2020 Census. So yes, the 2010 numbers, they do break down by ethnicity, age, income in the household, segregated base. In the American survey, it's just a snapshot of a community because they don't count every house. But the census counts every household. So it will give you a snapshot of the community, but it doesn't give you the total picture, which is why the 2020 census, which is odd in the sense that we're doing this prior to that information, that's going to shift the boundaries potentially in Richmond. So we'll be at this not necessarily because of the lawsuit, we're going to be at this again just because of the census tracts are going to change dramatically just for this area.
And the cities will be required to project every 10 years.
Correct.
All right, so in respect for everyone's time, also in respect of the church's time, they do need to shut down. We want to thank everyone for coming out tonight and having a robust conversation, really great questions. We did audio record this and will be up on our website. And information is available on the City of Richmond's website. So thank you all again. Thank you, Shanice, for coming out from NDC. And if you have comments, once again, if you want to state that you like a map and you like it for a certain reason, there's the green cards, fill them out, submit them back to us. Also, you can put a post-it note on a map that you like to tell us why you like it. That will help inform NDC as they present additional maps to the City Council or revised maps to the City Council on December 17th. That is our next we have another community meeting December 10th at Booker T. Anderson Community Center on the south side at 7 p.m. And then the next public hearing is December 17th at City Council. Thank you so much. Don't forget to take food if there's any left.